Nick, welcome to the Compete Everyday podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, congratulations on the release of your new book. I know that's an exciting first step, having been almost a year ago myself, my book dropped. Before we kind of get into the book and why you wrote it and some of the fundamentals in it, give everyone a snapshot of what you do. And then I'm curious if you could lead it off. What initiated you starting RP?
What initiated RP? So we got to go back a long ways.
Let's do it.
You could probably make a really good argument that we could go back to me being in junior high. So I have a brother that's 4 years older than me. So of course he was into sports and he's training. And funny story, my parents had an old like rickety weight set in our basement. One of those like really small, narrow benches.
Oh yeah, where you're like this on the bench press. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so that's just what I got started there. I got started on lifting there and I loved it. Again, had a brother 4 years older than me. So obviously, I see what he's doing. I want to do it. He's doing sports and all that. I'm like, okay, this is what I need to do. And yeah, I don't know. It's always been a passion of mine. I've just always been into fitness. I was never athletically gifted. It's probably a good way to say it, to be quite nice to myself. But the one thing that I did have is I just outworked everyone for the most part. And I always thought that was really cool because, there's a story in the book, but it's a story I like to tell. I was not a good runner my freshman year doing cross country. And pretty much no one else on the team did what they were supposed to over the summer. And then first day of practice, my sophomore year, I'm up running with the top guys from the year before. And I'm like, it's kind of one of these things where you're almost not even sure because you're like, what's going on here? Like, is everyone else hurt or what's going on? And I just realized, I'm like, well, shoot, I just outworked everybody. And then that's when I started to piece together these, the pieces of the puzzle. And I was like, well, shoot, what if I just keep doing this? If I just keep outworking everyone else, like maybe I have a chance. And so I was like, a decent runner through high school. And that's kind of what set the stage for ultimately, just being into fitness, loving the idea of, hey, if I do X, Y, Z, I'm going to get these outputs. And I just kept at it, kept just working.
I'm curious along those lines. Did you ever have an instance early on where that work ethic just didn't help you get your goal? And then how did you seem to respond? Did you look at it as, well, crap, maybe I just don't have the talent for it, or do I need to work harder, or what do I need to do differently? Kind of what was your mentality around that?
I got a great story about that, actually. So my junior year, track and field was probably my better sport of the two between that and cross country. But so I was on our 4x400 meter relay team, and we were going to set our school record. So we were at the state track meet. This is Michigan, like Division III, so smaller school, and we did really well. And our anchor guy, and in hindsight, I probably should have been the anchor, but hindsight's 2020, right? But we missed the school record by about 0.5 seconds. And our anchor guy kind of let off a little bit right at the tail end because he got passed right at the end. And he gave up a little bit. Like half a second, that's, you snap your finger, that's half a second. And it's one of these things, that was our goal. That was our goal. We were going to do it. We were so close. We had, 4 good guys. We could have done it. We should have done it. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go solo myself senior year. I'm gonna break the 800 meter record at our school.
Oh, what a race. Oh, hurts my soul
right?
Thinking about running the 800s again.
Yeah, totally. Well, you're talking, you're preaching the choir here. Listen, 400, 800, probably the 2 worst events that there are. But again, that just kind of went back to my mentality. I was never fast enough to be a 100 or 200 meter sprinter. And I wasn't a good enough long distance runner either. But you kind of pick those things that no one else wants to do because they suck and they're terrible. And I'm like, well, I don't sign me up for those. Like, that's the only chance I have. So anyway, so I'm so motivated. I'm trained my tail off, just work all summer long. I was just after it, didn't do any winter sports. I was just training year round. I'm like, I had that number written basically everywhere in my room. It was just everywhere. It's like, basically that was what I was doing. That's what I set out to do the whole next year. Finally, our regional meet, I was less than a second off from breaking it again, but I ran like a sub 2 minute 800. I'm like, all right, I got a shot. I'm going in the state meet. I'm ranked like 3rd or 4th. Like, here we go. This is it. And what happened? So it's an 8-lane track. We were used to run on like a 6-lane one, smaller high school. So I'm way out in lane 4. So what happens when you finally come around the corner and you got to start cutting in. Oh, yeah, this is state meet, right? Everyone's sprinting the first lap. So I'm way on the outside. And well, again, lo and behold, I didn't do it. So it's one of those things, like you can work as hard as you want, but you're not guaranteed success. It just doesn't matter. So early on, that was this wake up call that, hey, you can train all you want, but you still might not get it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times our response to that is how really we set up in the next venture, the next pursuit, the next journey of understanding, sometimes that work isn't enough, but it's the only thing that gives us a shot. And really understanding, like, sometimes everything's not going to work out. That's when we talk about competing. Everybody wants the win and the prize and the trophy, but not everybody is willing to compete for it because there's a chance you may fail. There's a chance you're going to fall short. And it's the people that are willing to risk that really set themselves apart over time. So taking that work ethic, that mentality that you're kind of going to go all in on yourself, flash forward to today, you look at RP and the strength program and everything you do from a health and wellness standpoint. You've got a big team of practitioners, I would say, and coaches. And kind of where did the beginning stage of that to now? Because a lot of times when we look at success and we look at a journey, we only see the end point or where you're at right now. And most people will never start pursuing something because they just assume things magically fell into place that way at the beginning. So take me back to kind of that inspiration to really helping people more than anything else change their life.
Yeah, well, I actually met my colleague, Dr. Mike Israetel. Him and I met at the student weight room, the University of Michigan. So we were just, again, it goes back to that passion. We just were really both a couple of meatheads, for lack of better terms, right? We were just a couple of meatheads, met in the gym, just sort of that mutual respect. You see people doing some impressive things. There's like, hey, he recruited me to join their powerlifting club that they had at the University of Michigan. And I was immediately hooked because, I loved competing. I loved getting after it. And they're like, hey, you should come do this. I'm like, cool, sign me up. Absolutely. And I started training with him. He started writing my diet training programs. This is 2007. So a long time ago.
Yeah.
But again, it set that stage. I was like, this is what I want to do. I got into bodybuilding after that. Because again, like, what do you have in bodybuilding? You have to be incredibly disciplined. You have to work incredibly hard. Like if you have those, you're going to stand a decent chance. And so I was just immediately drawn to that. I just love that process. You work really hard, get after it, just keep doing it. You're going to get a little bit better over time. And then what happens? You're probably going to look a certain way. And there's just always something a little bit more to do in strength sports. You can always get stronger, right? You can always have a little bit more muscle or be a little bit lean or sports, you can always get a little bit faster. So I just love that whole idea and concept of there's always something more you can be doing to get better.
I love it. I love it. So what initiated, I guess, the idea to launch the company? Because a lot of people have that mentality of like, oh, I'm going to keep lifting, I'm going to keep pushing, I'm going to keep training. But something had to have switched where the two of you decided to partner up and say, how can we help others do this too?
Yeah, so we both went out to New York City after we graduated. He was a couple years ahead of me, so he had his master's. We both moved out to New York City. We were personal trainers for a while. I kind of knew that wasn't what we wanted to do long term, just because it's really grueling to be a personal trainer. You're up early, you're up late training people before work, after work, their lunch hours. So we knew that we loved helping people in the fitness space. We knew that we wanted to coach people, help people reach their goals, all that good stuff, but kind of knew early on that, well, just being one-on-one personal trainers probably wasn't going to be long-term sustainable. So he started doing some online coaching. He went back to get his PhD, and I was still training people in person. And we were sort of referring clients back and forth a lot. And he was like, well, hey, why don't you just start working with some people online? I said, oh, I could probably do that. I mean, no one knows this stuff better than you. And so tried that. And this was like one of these light bulb moments where I'm like, well, I no longer have to travel all over New York City, all over the buses and subways and chasing clients all over town. I'm like, I can sit in my apartment and write programs for people. This is pretty cool. So that was probably the first light bulb moment that like, yeah, there's probably something to this. We probably want to steer ourselves in that direction. And so that's kind of where things started to trend for the first couple of years. Long story short, then we got into digital products. We saw how that was even more scalable than coaching. And we were like, okay, there's something here. We got to figure out how to do this. That eventually led to the diet templates, which, several iterations later led to the app. Numerous iterations later, here we are with the current Heartbeat Diet Coach.
And I love it. And yeah, I mean, even just getting on your website now, you've got so many different offerings from the month to month. You have 3 months, you have 6 month, 12 month, just really a lot of things that help meet people kind of where they are and get rolling, which I love. And now you've shifted gears because you wrote a book. You wrote a book over really, I think you were sharing that you wrote some during COVID of seeing an opportunity to get more of this messaging out, Fit for Success, lessons on achievement and leading your best life. I love the book and everything I've read so far because there's a lot of overlap in terms of how we see things and a lot of the messages of things that we're putting out because those truths have been reiterated for decades and centuries, like they still stand the test of time. And so tell me a little bit, what kind of kicked you into gear to finally sit down and write a book? Because I'm sure a lot of these truths and ideas have been with you for a while. Your work ethic's been with you, you said, all of your life. What made you finally decide to put pen to paper though?
Yeah, so our 2020, started 4 days before my son's 8th birthday. My wife was diagnosed with breast cancer. And, that's not great news, of course. Fast forward, 13, 14 months, she's fine now. She's doing very, very well. But again, at the time we had that, she had surgery in February, started chemo in March of 2020. This is all before COVID even hit, before COVID was a thing. So we throw all that in there. That's bad enough by itself. Went to our first chemo session with her. Couldn't go to any more because right after that, quarantine hit, COVID, pandemic, all that. So basically we had all this sort of bunched together in the span of 3 months. And I don't know about you, but I'm not the type of person that's going to be a victim, that's going to sit back and, be, oh, woe is me. Like, life is so hard. Oh, we were just dealt a bad hand,
Yep.
woe is us, pity party, downward spiral, et cetera.
Well, and that's not good. That wouldn't have helped your wife or your kid in that situation either, had you adopted that mentality.
100%. Absolutely. And actually early on, so Z at Barbells for Boobs, you probably know her because she's in the CrossFit space. She told me 2 things. And it's really funny looking back. One, she's like, you got to focus on the things that you can control. I'm like, okay, yeah, I know that. And she's like, you got to keep a positive mindset. And it was funny because if you look in the book, those are essentially the second and third pillars of success. And so I had kind of been mulling on these ideas in my head for a couple of years. I'm an avid reader. I love to read anything I can get my hands on. I just started to notice all these commonalities of, hey, someone's successful in fitness or, working with some high level athletes. You sort of get you see the little snippets of their mindset come through and you're like, oh, that's really interesting. These people all have these things in common. I'm like, well, this is just fitness. I wonder if these will apply to other areas. You start reading personal finances, you start reading business, entrepreneur books, you name it. You just start to notice all these common universal things that successful people have in common.
Yep.
And just one day I sketched out a little pyramid of it because, at RP, if you've read any of our other books, nutrition, training, recovery, it's all based on a pyramid, right? You have the most important things at the bottom and you work your way up. And so I wrote one of those, I shared it with a couple of people. And I'm like, hey, what do you think here? And I'm like, am I crazy? I'm like, well, you're of course crazy for other reasons, but not maybe this, you might be onto something. And then, because I knew that we had the pandemic going on, I knew that I had several months I was going to be at home, legitimately was not going anywhere, right? Because if we go back in time a year from where we are right now, no one knew what COVID-19, we didn't know anything. Everyone thought it was literally the end of the world. And it obviously was very, very bad. But man, we were stuck at home for like 3 or 4 months straight because my wife's going through chemo, immune system greatly compromised. So we had to treat it very seriously. So I said, you know what? Why not make some good come of this? I'm not going anywhere for a while. I have more time. I think that given the nature of 2020, everyone was impacted in some form or another, mostly negative. A lot of people are going to need this message. Now, again, like you said earlier, maybe not new messages. These things go back in time thousands of years. If we go back to the Romans and Stoics, like these ideas have been around, but sometimes we need to hear things in a more fresh or unique perspective, and you kind of give your own personal spin on it. And because I know this happened to me a lot of times in the book writing process or the idea process, you can hear something 10 times, but the 11th time you hear it and you just have like that. You're just having that right day where you're like, holy crap, like that's it. And a light bulb goes off. So that was really the inspiration for the book and having the downtime during COVID.
I love it. Well, and you hit the nail on the head as I was chatting earlier today with another speaker, and I know you speak as well, The idea that, yeah, you can go to an event, you can go to a conference or watch them online these days, and 10 people can be saying the exact essentially takeaway and lesson, but the way they share it, how they package it, and what they sell around there, what they tell around the story, maybe it impacts you differently than someone else. And so at any
Mhm.
given conference, 10 people could be saying the same thing, but you connect with three because of how they tell that story. And I think that just reinforces the importance of people listening, of like, if you're gonna, you should create something. Like, doesn't matter if somebody else has written it, talked about it, posted a video on it, made a podcast. Like, you need to tell that story, that truth, that lesson from your own lens, because somebody out there may need to hear it from your perspective. And so one, I want to commend you on the process of taking everything you were learning and write the book and sharing some of your own stories, because I know how brutal that writing process can be.
Mhm.
But two, just being willing to do it, similar to what you guys do at RP. I know you do things very differently than other organizations, but there were a lot of organizations in the health and fitness space when you guys started, but you didn't let that deter. This is how we want to do it. This is how we want to tell our story and help our clients differently. So I want to kind of commend you on that, and obviously raise awareness to our listeners who may be thinking, well, that's cool, but somebody else has already done what I want to do. One of the things I want to switch gears slightly on that I love talking about, because I feel a lot of people misinterpret when we talk about competing every day. They think, man, I've got to be in the gym training every day, hitting PRs, yada, yada, yada. And I'm heavy to push, like, you've got to rest, you got to recover, you got to take care of yourself so you can be at your best later. I know your book covers a chapter on recharging and the importance of, from a physical standpoint, we understand the harder we train, our muscles break down. They need time to recover with nutrition, with rest. But you also talk about the mental side of recovery and the importance of recharging there. Did you ever struggle with that yourself, and have that as a hard lesson that you had to learn because you had this, I'm going to outwork everyone mentality?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. So it's one of these things where I think, again, because of social media, we only sort of see the highlight reel, and we
Yeah.
think that, everyone's, perfect all the time, man. I struggle with all these things. I mean, maybe you do as well. Who knows?
Yep.
We all do, right? But yeah, absolutely. So there's a point early on, we'll call it probably 2016, maybe late 2016, something like that. And we were just basically working so hard around the clock, customer service stuff at RP, that, my wife and I were really close to just burning out. Like we were answering all the emails, making sure everything was taken care of. Obviously, laying a really good foundation, so we'd be known to having good customer service. But you can only do that for so long, and we're talking this is like over a year and a half, something like that. But it's just day in, day out, repeat, repeat. Like, what day is it? I don't know. Well, we have more emails today, so it's probably a Sunday or Monday or something like that. But we were definitely to that point, and it's really hard when you're so in the weeds, you're so in the day-to-day grind, that you almost feel like you can't step back and kind of look at the bigger picture. Because if you do, it's like, well, all this stuff that needs to get done is now not getting done. And if you push it to the next day, now you compound that with the next day's tasks. And it's like now you have this avalanche of things to do. So it's really hard. But again, we finally got through that point. We were able to get some help in. And then once we were able to get that help in, now, hey, I'm not stuck in customer service, 6 hours a day or something like that. Now I can focus on other areas. And that's when the business started to grow quite a bit. And this was obviously the right call. But that was a really good example of burnout right there for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. I did a workshop about 2 years ago in Oregon, and it was with the Chamber of Commerce. It was a ton of business leaders in the area. And I got to talking to one of the CEOs afterwards, and he's like, I haven't taken an afternoon, because we did a 3-hour training. He's like, I haven't done this maybe ever, because I'm always so worried about getting behind. Like you said, that avalanche that keeps building that we always have fear of. But unless we sometimes take that break away to get a different perspective, or maybe evaluate how we need to be doing things differently, or maybe a lot of times, like you guys went through with the customer service side, sometimes we got to get somebody in there to get this off of our plate so we can focus on the right things. It takes that need to step back. And a lot of times people are afraid to take that day off, to take that step back to recover, but it's a necessary piece in terms of the long-term growth. And I think the way we do that is just having that long-term perspective of, I may be a little bit more to do tomorrow, or maybe I'm cutting 10 things off my plate tomorrow because I have a better perspective of where we're trying to go. So I appreciate you sharing that. You did mention it, so I'm curious as well. You work with your wife. How do you two manage working, being obviously coworkers, spouses, parents? How do you do that in a healthy manner where work doesn't bleed too much into the personal relationship and vice versa, because I know that's got to be a challenge when you're with each other all the time. And I imagine for people that are listening that have been at home on quarantine that are working in the same office as their spouse are like, please tell me how you do this without killing each other.
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. So probably the main thing that we did is I would sort of focus on the things that I was good at. I would, keep to my core things, and then she would have her core things. Like, so she writes all of her cookbooks, and she helps do the financials and other things like that. But she would, more so focus on those, and I wouldn't get too heavily involved in those areas. Kind of like, oh, hey, you're going to do this new cookbook. Hey, that's awesome. If she had questions, she'd come ask me. But it's definitely not one of those things where I'm standing over her shoulder, kind of go, oh, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And she's not doing that to me, vice versa. So it's a challenge for sure. It's not always sunshine and rainbows, but we make it work.
I love it. So curious, do you guys have, in terms of a family time, or you and your wife, in terms of set recurring dates or windows or breaks so that you make sure you're spending time outside of just work?
Oh boy, well that's a really tricky one, because if you would ask me that before COVID, I would have had a different answer. Now it's a little bit weird because we've had to be more cautious and everything around our
Yeah.
health issues. Uh, Honestly, our main thing is, we'll kind of at the end of the night sit down and usually watch some sort of TV or something together, just kind of relax, unwind a little bit, different series, stuff like that. We're not really going out a ton now. Usually we'll have like a Friday night pizza night, and so our family will order a pizza in, usually like watch a movie, something like that. Nothing too crazy. We haven't been able to, get away as much recently in the past year or so, but
Yeah.
hopefully now things seem to be turning the corner for everyone.
And she's doing better, as you mentioned.
She's doing very well. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So she finished treatment way back in August, which seems crazy to think back, and that it's now been over a year since all this COVID stuff hit last year, and she's been done for a while. She's doing really well. Yeah, I mean,
Love
knock
it.
on wood, things are going really well.
I love it. So, and everybody listening just caught that you do Friday night pizza nights, and they're like, I need to learn nutrition from this guy. If he will eat pizza, that means there's an opportunity potentially for me if it's in the plan too. So Nick, man, where can people find out more about your programs, and especially where can we pick up a copy of your book?
Yeah, so just go on Amazon, just search Fit for Success. You can type in my name too, but it should come up if you type in Fit for Success, or just look up at nick.shaw.rp on Instagram, or if you want to follow RP, just at RP Strength. That's probably where most people know about us.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll be linking to all of those in the show notes. So you can go on there, grab a copy of Nick's book off Amazon. And definitely, if you're interested in taking your training, your nutrition to a new level, these guys are great guys. They've got an awesome team. I've seen the witness of their work over the years just through the Compete Everyday community. I know we have a ton of people listening to the podcast, engage with us online, that are members of RP Strength and have gone through your programs and transformation. So want to recommend that as well. Nick, man, thanks for hanging out on the show this week.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.